Hey yo, listen.
Drop it low to the flow. Oh.
Like it like that.
Yeah. Oh. Are you ready for this?
All right, everyone, get ready, because today we're going deep, really deep, into the world of AI, copyright law, and what it all means for creators like you. I'm sure we've all seen the amazing things AI can do these days, creating incredible images with tools like Midjourney, composing music, even writing code. But, and here's the real head-scratcher, who owns all of that amazing AI-generated stuff? It's a lot more complicated than you might think.
You know, it really is fascinating. We're basically trying to cram this brand new kind of shape-shifting idea of AI into this old, rigid box of copyright law, which, let's face it, has been around for centuries. And honestly, that's creating some serious legal headaches.
Okay, so let's break this down. I bet a lot of you listening have played around with some of these AI tools. But have you ever stopped to think, do you, the person giving the AI the instructions, actually own what it creates?
That's the big question, isn't it? And in the U.S. at least. We had a recent court case, Thaler v. Perlmutter, and it really shook things up. The court actually ruled that stuff created by AI all on its own can't be copyrighted because, they said, there's no human author.
Wait, hold on a sec. So I can spend hours crafting the perfect prompt, get Deli to make me this incredible image, and legally it might not even be mine. That doesn't seem right. I mean, I put in the creative work.
I get it. It does seem counterintuitive. But the law, well, it's always playing catch-up with technology, isn't it? And to make things even trickier, you've got the companies behind these tools with their terms of service. And those often stake a claim on what users create.
You mean those super long, jargon-filled things that no one reads?
Exactly. But here's why they matter. Take Deli, for example. It's created by OpenAI, and their terms of service say they can use, reproduce, even publicly display anything users create. They say it's for research and development.
So let me get this straight. My AI masterpiece could end up in one of their research papers, maybe even helping them make more money, all without my permission.
That is one way to look at it, yes. Then you have platforms like Midjourney. Depending on how much you pay, they might let other people use the images you create. They offer different levels of control, but as you can imagine, more control usually means more money.
Okay, so the lesson here is clear. Read those terms of service, but honestly, sometimes it feels like they're written in a different language.
Right.
So any tips on what to look out for?
Definitely pay attention to the parts about ownership, licensing, how your content can be used. Don't just skim and click agree. Take the time to understand what you're potentially giving up.
This is all great advice, especially with these tools becoming so popular. But it makes me wonder, where does the AI even get the raw material for all this amazing stuff it creates? Let's talk about AI training data and why it's causing such a stir.
Okay, now we're getting to the really interesting part. AI is trained on huge sets of data, and where all that data comes from. Well, that's raising some serious questions, ethical and legal questions. In fact, there have been accusations that some AI platforms are using copyrighted material without even asking for permission.
Hold on. So you're saying my AI art could be based on someone else's work? And I wouldn't even know it. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen, not just for the companies, but for users too.
You're absolutely right. And it's not just a theoretical concern. Stable Diffusion, for instance, they're facing lawsuits right now because their image-generating AI was apparently trained on data sets that included copyrighted material. And then there are the claims about Meta's language model, a llama, allegedly trained using data scraped from a piracy website.
Whoa, a piracy website? That's pretty bold, but why is this such a big deal?
Because if you're a creator and you're using AI outputs, that came from stolen content. You could be putting yourself at risk. Imagine, without realizing it. You use someone else's copyrighted photo or code in your work. That could lead to serious legal trouble.
Yeah, that's definitely not a good situation. So how can we as creators avoid all this?
First and foremost, awareness is key. You have to understand that the data used to train these AIs might have some, shall we say, questionable origins. Look for platforms that are transparent about their training data and make sure they prioritize ethical sourcing. And there's another data-related issue that people often miss. A lot of these platforms are collecting data on you, the user. Your inputs, the prompts you use, what kind of content you create.
I get the data is valuable, but what does that mean for, the average user?
Well, take ChatGPT, it's become super popular, but hidden in their terms of service is this little clause that says they can use your prompts and your conversations with the AI. for
Yeah.
training, unless you specifically opt out.
So all those late-night chats I've had with ChatGPT, bouncing ideas around for my next project, those could be feeding their algorithm. It feels a little, I don't know, invasive.
It definitely raises some privacy concerns. And it really highlights how important it is to be careful about what you share with these tools, especially if it's sensitive information, confidential stuff. Imagine putting some top secret business strategy into an AI and then finding out it's being used to train a model that other people might be able to access.
Okay, that's actually kind of scary. It really makes you realize how quickly things can get complicated
Right.
with all this AI stuff. So what can our listeners do to protect their data? Aside from reading those terms of service, of course.
Definitely be vigilant about what you share. Look for platforms that give you the option to opt out of data collection. And for really sensitive information, consider using AI tools that work offline to minimize the risk of data leaks.
These are some really helpful tips. We've talked about a lot of potential risks so far, but I think this is where things get really interesting, or maybe I should say nerve-wracking. What happens when AI, even with the best intentions, accidentally leads you down the path of copyright infringement?
Ah, yes, the unintended consequences. Of AI's creative power, it's totally possible to become a copyright infringer without even realizing it, even when you're trying to be original.
Okay, I'm all ears. How did that even happen? Give us some real-world examples.
All right, let's look at GitHub Copilot. It's a tool that helps programmers write code. Sounds super useful, right? The problem is, it's been criticized for sometimes suggesting code that's practically identical to copyrighted code in its database. So imagine you're a developer. You're using Copilot, and without knowing it, you put some of that copyrighted code into your project. Suddenly, you're facing a potential infringement issue.
Yikes. That's a programmer's worst nightmare. It really shows how even tools that are meant to help us can create these unexpected legal traps. Any other cautionary tales? Maybe from the world of AI art?
We've seen similar issues with image generators, like Midjourney, for instance. It's known for creating images that look a lot like certain artist styles, and that's led to lawsuits and a lot of debate in the art community.
So even if I'm not trying to copy someone,
Right.
the AI could be drawing on copyrighted material, and I end up being the one who's responsible. That seems incredibly unfair.
Unfortunately, that's often the case.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, many platforms have something called an indemnity clause in their terms of service.
Yeah.
Basically, this means if you use their AI tool and what you create infringes on someone's copyright, you're the one who's liable. They're essentially saying, not our problem.
Wait, that's like giving someone a tool that might be broken and then saying, hey, if it breaks something, you're the one who has to pay for it. How is that even legal?
It's a tricky issue, and the laws are still being figured out. But those indemnity clauses, they're pretty common, and they can have serious consequences.
So besides reading those terms of service, what can creators do to protect themselves?
If you're using AI-generated content, for anything commercial, be extra careful, because the stakes are much higher. You might even want to talk to an intellectual property lawyer, just to be on the safe side.
That makes sense. What about for those of us who are just using AI for personal projects? Any advice?
Absolutely. Never think of the AI output as the final product. Think of it as a starting point, like raw material. Something to be shaped and molded. Add your own unique style to it. Change it up, make it your own. The more human input and originality you add, the better protected you'll be if any copyright questions come up.
It's almost like treating the AI as a collaborator.
Exactly.
Not just a content machine. And this brings me to something I've been thinking about. With all this uncertainty around the legal stuff, it's actually encouraging to see that governments around the world are starting to address these issues.
Yeah, things are changing quickly. We're seeing a lot of activity. In terms of laws and policies, it shows that lawmakers are starting to realize that our legal systems need to adapt to this new reality.
Absolutely. So let's give our listeners a quick overview of some of the key cases and policy debates that are shaping the future of AI and copyright. What are some of the highlights we should all be aware of?
Well, we already talked about that landmark case, Thaler v. Perlmutter. That set a precedent in the U.S. about copyright and AI authorship, and its impact is going to be felt for a long time. Then there are the lawsuits against companies like Stable Diffusion and Meta, who are accused of using copyrighted stuff without permission to train their AI models.
Right. Those cases are definitely being watched closely by creators and legal experts. What about on the policy side? Any notable developments?
Well, the U.S. Copyright Office just came out with some guidelines, clarifying that you need a significant level of human input to claim copyright on AI-assisted work. So they're acknowledging the role of AI in creation, but they're still emphasizing that there needs to be a substantial creative contribution from a human being.
Makes sense. What about over in Europe?
In the UK, there's a big debate going on right now about a government proposal that would essentially let AI companies use copyrighted works for free to train their AIs.
Wait, for free? That doesn't sound good for artists and writers. Imagine your novels, your photographs, your songs being used without your permission to train some AI. That feel like a huge imbalance of power.
Exactly. And, as you might expect, a lot of authors and creators are fighting back against this. They're saying it's basically legalized theft of their creative work. And they're demanding stronger protections for their intellectual property.
It's a real David and Goliath situation, and it raises some fundamental questions about ownership and control. In this age of AI, what's the EU's stance on all this?
The EU is working on something called the AI Act, which is pretty ambitious. One of its main goals is to increase transparency around AI training data. They want to make sure developers are acting responsibly and not using copyrighted material without permission. They're also looking into ways to hold developers liable if their AI infringes on someone's copyright.
So a lot going on, different approaches, but it seems like the common thread is governments are recognizing that we need rules when it comes to AI and copyright.
Absolutely. This is a global conversation,
Yeah.
and it's only going to get bigger as AI becomes more powerful and more part of our lives.
Speaking of powerful, it's clear that AI tools have incredible potential. But as we've learned today, knowledge is power too. And that's what we're all about here at the Deep Dive.
We've given you a lot to think about today, but honestly, we've only just scratched the surface. It's so important to stay informed, stay engaged, and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.
It feels like we're on the edge of a whole new era of creativity, where the line between human and machine is getting blurrier and blurrier. And that brings me to a question for all of you listening. What role do you see for AI in the creative industries? These tools are here to stay, and they're only going to get more sophisticated. But what kind of future do we want to build with them? How do we use their power while also protecting the values that are important to us as creators?
That's the question, isn't it? There's no easy answer. And I think it's vital to involve lots of different perspectives: creators, legal experts, policymakers, the public. What kind of safeguards do we need? How do we balance the incredible potential of AI with the need to protect human creativity, intellectual property, privacy?
It's a complicated puzzle with no single solution. A musician might have a different view than a programmer or a visual artist. A novelist might see things differently than a filmmaker. And that's what makes this so interesting and so important. We need to hear from everyone.
I agree. This isn't just about technology. It's about the future of art, the future of human expression. It's about how we define creativity itself. In a world where machines are getting so good at mimicking, even surpassing, what humans can do.
Wow, that's deep.
Right.
It really makes you think. It challenges us to rethink our ideas about what it means to be creative, to be original. And it reminds us that the future isn't something that just happens to us. It's something we actively create through the choices we make, the conversations we have, the actions we take.
I like that. We're not just watching this technological revolution happen. We're part of it. Our voices matter.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of AI, copyright, and the future of creativity.
But the conversation doesn't stop here. Keep exploring these questions, stay informed, challenge assumptions, and talk to others about all this.
We've given you a lot to think about, and hopefully we've sparked your curiosity, inspired you to learn more.
Remember, the future of AI and creativity is being written right now. And your voice matters. Speak up, get involved. Let's shape this future together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep those brains buzzing and those creative sparks flying.
And there's another data-related thing that I think people often miss. A lot of these platforms are collecting data on you, the user, your inputs, your prompts, what you create.
I get that data is valuable, but what does that mean for the average person using these tools?
Well, look at ChatGPT, for example. It's become incredibly popular. But hidden in their terms of service, there's this little clause that says they can use your prompts and even your conversations with the AI to train their models, unless you specifically say no.
So you mean like all those late-night brainstorming sessions I've had with ChatGPT, throwing ideas around for my next big project, those could be feeding into their system?
Yeah.
That feels kind of, I don't know, creepy.
It definitely raises some privacy concerns, and it really highlights how important it is to be mindful of what you share with these tools, especially if it's sensitive information, confidential stuff. Imagine putting your top secret business strategy into an AI and then finding out that it's being used to train a model that others could potentially access.
Okay, yeah, now that is scary. It makes you think twice about what you put into these things. So any advice for our listeners? How can they protect themselves, besides reading those terms of service, of course?
Always be careful about what you share. Look for platforms that give you the option to opt out of data collection. And if you're working with really sensitive information, think about using offline AI tools. That way, you minimize the risk of data leaks.
Great tips. We've talked about a lot of risks today, but this is where things get really interesting and maybe a little bit scary. What happens when AI, even with the best of intentions, accidentally makes you a copyright infringer?
Yes, the unintended consequences of AI's creative potential.
Yeah.
It's entirely possible to end up breaking copyright law without even knowing it, even if you're trying to be original.
How does that even happen? What are we talking about here?
Let me give you an example. GitHub Copilot. It's a tool that helps programmers write code. Sounds useful, right? Well, the issue is, it's been criticized for suggesting code that's almost identical to copyrighted code into the database. So imagine you're a developer, you're using Copilot, and without realizing it, you incorporate some of that copyrighted code into your project. Now you're potentially facing a copyright infringement issue.
Oh, wow. That's like a worst-case scenario.
It is.
It really shows you how even tools that are supposed to make our lives easier can have these hidden dangers. What about AI art? Any similar stories there?
We've seen similar issues with image generators, like Midjourney. It's known for producing images that closely resemble the styles of specific artists. And that's led to lawsuits and a lot of debate within the art world.
So even if I'm not deliberately trying to copy someone,
Exactly.
the AI could be drawing on copyrighted material, and I end up being the one who gets in trouble.
Unfortunately, yes. And to add insult to injury, many platforms have something called an indemnity clause in their terms of service.
Indemnity clause.
It basically means if you use their AI tool and what you create violates someone's copyright, you're the one who's responsible. They're essentially washing their hands of it.
Hold on. That's like giving someone a tool that might be broken and saying, if you use it and it causes damage, you're the one who has to pay.
Pretty much.
How is that even allowed?
It's a complex issue. And the legal landscape is still developing. But those indemnity clauses are pretty common. And they can have serious consequences.
So what can creators do to protect themselves? Aside from, reading those terms of service really carefully.
If you're using AI-generated content for any commercial purpose, be extremely cautious. The stakes are much higher in those cases. It might even be worth talking to an intellectual property lawyer.
Good advice.
Just to make sure you're covered.
What about for those of us who are just experimenting with AI for fun, for personal projects? Any tips?
Always remember, what the AI produces, that's not the finished product. Think of it as a starting point, like raw material, something you can mold and shape, add your own creative flair to it, change it up, make it your own. The more of your own originality you add, the better.
It's like collaborating with the AI.
Exactly.
Not just letting it do all the work. It's interesting. With all this uncertainty around the legal aspects of AI, it's actually encouraging to see that governments around the world are starting to address these issues.
It's definitely a hot topic. We're seeing a lot of activity in terms of legislation and policy. It shows that lawmakers are recognizing that our legal systems need to catch up with technology.
For sure. So let's give our listeners a quick rundown of some of the key developments, cases, policy debates, that sort of thing. What are some of the highlights we should all be aware of?
Well, we've already talked about that landmark case, Taylor v. Perlmutter, which set a precedent in the U.S. regarding copyright and AI authorship. And its impact is going to be felt for years to come. Then you have those lawsuits against companies like Stable Diffusion and Meta, who are accused of using copyrighted material without permission to train their AI models.
Right. Those are definitely big ones. What about on the policy front? Any major updates there?
The U.S. Copyright Office recently released some guidelines. They basically said, to claim copyright on something created with AI, there needs to be a significant level of human input. So they're acknowledging the role of AI in the creative process, but they're still emphasizing that human creativity is essential.
Yeah, makes sense. What's happening over in Europe?
Well, in the UK, there's a pretty heated debate going on about a government proposal that would basically allow AI companies to use copyrighted works for free. to train their AI models.
Wait, for free?
Yep.
That doesn't sound good for artists and writers.
Not all.
I mean, imagine your novels, your photographs, your music being used without your consent
Right.
to train some AI. It feels like a major power imbalance.
Absolutely. And unsurprisingly, a lot of creators are pushing back against this proposal. They're saying it's essentially legalized theft, and they're demanding stronger protections for their work.
It's like a classic David versus Goliath story.
It is.
And it raises some fundamental questions about who owns what. In this age of AI, what's the EU doing about all this?
The EU is working on something called the AI Act, which is pretty ambitious in scope. One of its goals is to increase transparency around AI training data. They want to ensure that developers are acting ethically and not using copyrighted material without permission. They're also exploring ways to hold developers liable if their AI infringes on someone's copyright.
So lots of different approaches,
Yeah.
but it seems like everyone's starting to recognize that we need some rules
We do.
when it comes to AI and copyright.
Absolutely. It's a global conversation.
Right.
And it's only going to get more important as AI becomes more powerful
Yeah.
and more integrated into our lives.
Speaking of powerful, it's clear these AI tools have incredible potential.
They do.
But knowledge is power too, right? And that's what we're all about here at the Deep Dive.
Exactly. We've given you a lot to think about today. But this is really just the tip of the iceberg. It's crucial to stay informed, stay curious, and keep asking those critical questions.
We're on the cusp of a whole new era of creativity, where the line between human and machine is getting blurrier and blurrier, which leads me to a question for our listeners.
I'm listening.
What role do you see for AI in the creative industries? These tools are here to stay, and they're only going to get more advanced. But what kind of future do we want to build with them? How do we harness their power while also protecting what's important to us as creators?
That's the million-dollar question. And I don't think there's a simple answer. We need to bring everyone to the table for this conversation. Creators, legal experts, policymakers, the public. What safeguards do we need to put in place? How do we balance the potential of AI with the need to protect human creativity, intellectual property rights, our privacy?
It's a complex issue.
It is.
With no easy solutions. A musician might have a different perspective than a programmer. A visual artist might see things differently than a writer. And that's what makes this conversation so fascinating.
I agree.
We need to hear from everyone.
This is about more than just technology. It's about the future of art, of human expression. How do we define creativity? In a world where machines are becoming so good at mimicking, even surpassing, what humans can do.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? It challenges our assumptions about what it means to be creative, to be original. And it reminds us that the future isn't predetermined. We shape it through the choices we make, the conversations we have,
Absolutely.
our actions.
We're not just passive observers in this technological revolution. We're active participants, and our voices matter.
I love that.
Yeah.
And on that empowering note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the world of AI, copyright, and the future of creativity.
But the conversation doesn't end here. Keep exploring these issues, stay informed, challenge assumptions, and talk to others about it.
We've given you a lot to think about today,
We have.
and hopefully we've sparked your curiosity and inspired you to learn even more.
Remember, the future of AI and creativity is being written right now. And you have a voice. Speak up. Get involved. Let's shape this future together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and until next time, keep those brains buzzing and those creative sparks flying. It really does make you think. It challenges us to, rethink our ideas about what it even means to be creative, to be original. And I think it reminds us that the future isn't, set in stone. We actually have a say in it through the choices we make, the discussions we have,
Exactly.
the things we do.
We're not just bystanders
Yeah.
in this whole tech revolution. We're active participants. And our voices, they really do matter.
So true. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into AI, copyright, and the future of creativity.
But the conversation doesn't end here, right? Keep exploring these questions. Stay informed. Challenge those assumptions. And talk to other people about it.
We've given you a lot to think about, and hopefully we've made you curious, inspired you to dig a little deeper.
Remember, the future of AI and creativity is being shaped right now. And your voice is part of that. Speak up. Get involved. Let's build this future together.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep those brains buzzing and keep those creative sparks flying.
Like it like that. Hey yo, listen.
Drop it low to the flow. Oh, oh,
Like it like that.
yeah. Oh, are you ready for this?